You inherit half of your DNA from your mom and half from your dad, but do you actually look like a mix of the two? Well, it's not that simple. There are genes, genotypes, phenotypes, dominant alleles, and recessive ones. So let's explore the story of traits and figure out how we get our genotype, what it means for our phenotype, and how it all ends up making us us. Hey there, welcome to my channel. BioTales for Bright Minds. We're starting a brand new series called DNA Science. And in this episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at deoxyribonucleic acid, aka DNA, which is the molecule that stores all the genetic instructions used in the growth, development, functioning, and reproduction of all known living organisms and many viruses. Now, before we jump into the juicy details, if you like this kind of stuff, then be sure to subscribe because we will be creating more videos that are similar to this one. In part 1, we'll start off by learning what DNA is. In part 2, we'll figure out what DNA does. In part 3, we'll learn about genotype versus phenotype. And in part 4, we'll learn why it matters. Alright, now that we've got the agenda set, let's begin with part 1. What is DNA? To answer that question, you have to start with a little chemistry. The full name of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a type of nucleic acid. Nucleic acids are large biomolecules made of smaller repeating subunits called nucleotides. Nucleotides contain 3 parts, a sugar molecule, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. DNA has 4 types of bases represented by the letters A, T, C, and G. And it turns out that the sequence of these bases is what determines your traits. But just having these individual molecules floating around wouldn't be very efficient. They need to be packaged in a way that can fit inside the nucleus of a cell, which is pretty small. So they form something called a double helix, which is basically a spiral staircase. The sugar and phosphate molecules make up the handrails, and the steps of the staircase are made up of the base pairs. Remember that each step needs 2 things to make it. So the base pairs are formed by pairing an A with AT and AC with AG. This is called complementary base pairing. And it's important because it's the foundation for everything else. One thing that you should know is that DNA has a lot of instructions, and it's written in a language that we don't really understand. I mean, it's a language nonetheless. So instead of writing it out in full sentences, it's more like a list of words where every third letter stands for something. For example, the word cat has 3 letters, so maybe the first letter stands for the letter A, the second for T, and the third for C. Now if you saw the word bat, then you would know that B stands for T, right? Because the second letter is T and the third letter is also C. And if you saw the word dog, you would know that D stands for A, O stands for T, and G stands for C. And so on and so forth. But instead of letters, DNA is made of nucleotides. So instead of a word standing for a whole phrase, a sequence of 3 nucleotides stands for an amino acid. And the sequence of amino acids is what builds proteins. Proteins are like the workers that carry out all of the tasks in the body. So in a way, DNA tells them what to do. We can think of DNA as a giant recipe book that contains all of the recipes needed to build a human being. Each recipe in the book is a gene. Each gene contains the instructions for building a certain protein, which in turn does something in the body. So another way to think of DNA is as a blueprint. It's a set of instructions that tell the body how to assemble itself. To summarize, DNA is a molecule that's found in the nucleus of most living cells. It's made up of nucleotides, which are made up of a sugar, a phosphate, and one of 4 bases, A, T, C, or G. The order of these bases is what determines the traits of an organism. It's like a language written in the letters A, T, C, and G. And the words in this language are made up of 3-letter sequences which stand for amino acids, which in turn build proteins. In part 2, we'll talk about what DNA does. But before we move on, I want to show you a cool visual idea that I think will help you remember what we just learned. Imagine a grand staircase that leads up to the royal ballroom. The handrails of the staircase are made of shiny gold, and each step is decorated with either a red or blue carpet. That's kind of like DNA. The gold handrails represent the sugar and phosphate molecules, and the steps represent the base pairs. And just like in DNA, each step needs 2 things to make it. The only difference is that the stair steps can be decorated with either a red or blue carpet, whereas DNA uses either an A or AT, or AC or AG. Either way, it's a really cool visual idea that helps you see how DNA is made. For part 2, let's talk about what DNA does. First, DNA stores genetic information. It's like a hard drive that holds all of your personal files. Genes are like individual files on the hard drive. Each file contains instructions for building a certain protein. Second, DNA guides protein synthesis. This is like taking the files on your hard drive and using them to build something in the real world. DNA does this through transcription and translation. During transcription, the DNA molecule is read and copied. Then during translation, the copy is used to build a protein. Third, DNA enables inheritance. This is how genetic information is passed down from one generation to the next. For example, you inherit half of your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. Fourth, DNA enables replication. This is how genetic information is copied when cells divide. For example, when you get a cut, your skin cells replicate to heal the wound. Fifth, DNA drives growth, repair and reproduction. This is how genetic information is used to build new cells and tissues. For example, when you exercise, your muscles grow and repair themselves. When you reproduce, you pass on your genetic information to the next generation. To summarize, DNA is the molecule that carries genetic information. It's like a computer chip that controls how cells work. It stores genetic information, guides protein synthesis, enables inheritance, enables replication, and drives growth, repair and reproduction. In part 3, we'll learn about genotype versus phenotype. But before we move on, I want to show you a cool visual idea that I think will help you remember what we just learned. Imagine a factory that produces all sorts of products. The factory manager sends messages to the assembly line telling them what to build. That's kind of like DNA. The messages from the manager represent the genetic information in DNA. The assembly line represents the rest of the cell. And the products represent the proteins that are built from the instructions in DNA. So now that we know what DNA does, let's talk about genotype versus phenotype. The term genotype refers to the genetic makeup of an organism. It's the actual alleles that you have. In contrast, the term phenotype refers to the observable traits of an organism. Examples of traits include eye color, height, and blood type. Your genotype determines your phenotype. For example, you might have a genotype that makes you tall, or you might have a genotype that makes you short. But your phenotype is the actual height that you end up being. One thing that you should know is that the same genotype doesn't always result in the same phenotype. For example, imagine two flowers. Both flowers have the same genotype for color, which is BB. The genotype BB means that both parents contributed a dominant allele for the color of the flower. So the flower should be red. However, one flower is red and the other is white. Why is this? Well, it's because the environment in which the flowers grew changed the way that the genotype was expressed. In this case, the flower that grew in the shade was unable to produce enough chlorophyll, so it turned white. Another example is identical twins. Identical twins have the same genotype, but they may have different phenotypes. For example, one twin might be taller than the other, even though they have the same genotype for height. Why is this? Well, it's because the environment in which the twins grew up might have been different. For example, one twin might have eaten healthier foods, which could have led to them being taller. To summarize, genotype refers to the genetic makeup of an organism, whereas phenotype refers to the observable traits of an organism. The same genotype doesn't always result in the same phenotype because the environment can play a role. In part 4, we'll learn why it matters. To understand why it matters, let's consider a few examples. First, DNA helps us understand heredity. Heredity is the passing of traits from parents to offspring. For example, if you have brown eyes, it's because you inherited a gene for brown eyes from each parent. Second, DNA helps us understand health. Many diseases are caused by mutations in DNA. For example, sickle cell anemia is caused by a mutation in the gene that codes for hemoglobin. Third, DNA helps us understand evolution. Evolution is the change in the genetic makeup of a population over time. For example, the gene that codes for antibiotic resistance in bacteria has evolved so that bacteria are no longer killed by antibiotics. To summarize, DNA helps us understand heredity, health, and evolution. Our genotype determines our phenotype, but the environment can also play a role. And that brings us to the closing of this episode. So next time you look in the mirror, remember, you're a walking story written in DNA. The genotype you inherit from your parents is like the first draft of your story. It gives you certain traits and predispositions, but it's not the whole story. Your environment and lifestyle choices are like the editor of your story. They can change the way your genotype is expressed. So your phenotype is ultimately a collaboration between your genes and your environment. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, let us know in the comments below with your favorite trait or a question about genetics. If you want to support our channel, please consider liking and sharing this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. And be sure to check out our social media. Alright, until next time, stay curious.